Live Pauper
That's
reaction.
incredible. That's incredible. Um, is there anything? Yeah, give me the YouTube face. John, a new year is still upon us. And with the new year comes talk of New Year's resolutions. And I think a lot of people's might be save money, try something new, clean out a bunch of the bulk that you have sitting around because you're a Magic player and you've been drafting for 15 years and you have drawers and drawers just stuffed with draft chaff. Do we have a format to talk about for any and all of those today? Today's episode of the MTG Thoughtcast, we are talking about the Pauper Commander variant, PDH, PEDH, something like that. I'm really excited to dive into it. But before we do, my name is Joseph, and I'm one of the hosts here on the MTG Thoughtcast. And across the screen or across your ears is my brother, John Kendall. John, how you doing today, man?
All the way on the other side, but only 2 pennies worth. Hello.
That's right. It's time to pay the pauper.
Haha. Hey there, we're doing just fine. Yeah, so like we've already done this year. We've already talked about the let's try something new for Commander. Now let's talk about saving some budget.
Absolutely, absolutely. And a lot of this is going to sound like budget, but some of it's just like building a commander deck. Before we start diving too heavily into the episode, the perfect companion for this episode, which is not about companions, the perfect companion to this episode and the companion episode is our Discord, linked in the bio. We hang out there all the time. It's just a great little community of some commander playing folk who love hanging out and building decks and playing games. So we'd love to have you there. It's totally free. Links down in the description. While you're down there, if you want to help us out a ton, also totally free. All of the YouTube buttons help us out so much. Or if you're listening on Spotify, a 5-star review gives us a ton of legwork in the algorithms that we're constantly trying to fight as content creators. So, likes, comments,
quick down in the
subscribes.
comments. What's your favorite YouTube button?
Everybody talk about your favorite YouTube button. Mine's the bell, obviously. Yeah, all that's out of the way. Let's go ahead and start talking about today's topic. Pauper Commander. John, can you give me a brief summary of what Pauper Commander is? For those who might not know the term pauper, even.
Yeah, so I guess we kind of just have to keep going like backwards a little bit. So Pauper is for at least for constructed anyway of other like I say constructed I mean like 60 card and stuff like that. Pauper is it's a regulated like official format, right? I
Sure
think
is.
it is. Yeah,
Yes.
because there's a ban list and things like that. Right. That makes sense. Yeah. Pauper for Magic is a format that is on the eternal scale, so just kind of like Legacy Vintage, that kind of thing. Except the difference with deck building is that for traditional Pauper, cards all have to be at least have had a paper printing in the common rarity, right? Cards all
Yes.
have a rarity in the booster packs and sets as they come out, whatever. And a Pauper deck has to be all cards that are at the common. And this is either like they're the first time printed at common, or when it comes to like reprints, they've been downshifted, and it's pretty huge. It's a very, very popular format. It's essentially for a variety of decks, it allows you to play the vintage catalog of Magic for usually under a couple $100 when it comes to a deck.
100%. Yes. It feels to me a bit like what the original idea for Commander was, which was, hey, we have all of these one-ofs sitting in our binder. What if we put them together in a singleton deck with a theme? Pauper feels a bit more like it keeps to that original spirit of Commander, especially where we are now, where they're printing cards directly into Commander and all of those things. The idea of like, well, I can just dig through my boxes of commons and find the most powerful of the least powerful rarity and put together a list of those and play it against other people who are doing the same thing. It's a very fun format. very cool tidbit about this format is the most expensive card that you could be playing outside of anything that maybe is beyond the scope of our research is Lotus Petal, which is $20. So like if you're building a list, you're almost assuredly going to land under $100 when you're talking about basic lands being mostly what you can play. Like there aren't incredible options for land base. You have like Ash Barrens is one that I play both in Pauper Commander now and in regular Commander. Things like Escape Tunnel and Evolving Wilds, but most of these revolve around basics. Your deck is going to be primarily basic lands. So you've got 30-ish of those, 35-ish of those, 64-ish regular cards, and the most expensive of those is going to be $20 a piece. Like you're in the clear to build a bunch of these. So for a deck builder and a brewer like myself, I have really enjoyed looking at a lot of these lists and going like, oh my God, this is $40. Like I could scrape that together right now and build a new deck out of this. So this has been a paradise for me. I'm curious, John, as you spent some time building your Pauper list, you went about it in a bit of a different way than I did. Tell me a bit about that.
In what regard? Just because like what I had available to me, or
Yeah,
I don't know what you mean.
exactly. I put a list together online first and then placed an order for the list and was excited about that.
Right. Okay. And then, yeah. And this was going to be the point that I thought was going to be very cool about this format is it like somebody else on the opposite end as compared to what Joseph's talking about. Somebody like me who has quite the surplus of I guess what would be called draft chaff commons from doing events and pre-releases and notably just buying packs. You know, one of the biggest issues that comes to when it comes to purchasing booster packs is you are going to end up with the pieces that are for like the limited play, and
you get 10 commons a pack.
Yeah, and like 9 times out of 10, those are not really going to be commons that you'll be putting into your regular commander decks. I know there's obviously there's variants to that here or there, you know, like especially if you're opening a booster pack that is designed towards like commander in mind. But if like you're ripping into something like a standard booster, chances are the things at common, unless your theme is narrow towards that set, they're never going to see the light of day again. And that's wonderful with this Pauper idea is that firstly, since we are talking about it as Pauper Commander, your actual general of this format is also possibly going to be an uncommon of some kind that you normally would not play in your commander decks. But then the bulk filled out in between is exactly that. It's bulk that you normally would have no other limelight, but because everybody else is going to be playing at a similar edge of power level, suddenly things that are like French vanilla 8/8s are your biggest threats.
Totally. Completely agree. This is a good point, or a good time, I think, to bring up the structure of the deck is that it's the 99 of the deck is all commons. Has to be 100% commons. Yeah, or 98. Your command zone is an uncommon creature. Specifically, does not have to be a legendary creature. What I've found in a lot of my research is that the legendary creatures are just powerful. Like they kind of inherently make legendary creatures very powerful, and it's almost, I don't know, I would say 80% of the time it's going to be better to just play one of the legendaries, specifically because there's so many uncommon legendary creatures with partner, which in any format where partner is legal, partner is busted. Completely broken mechanic. Putting 2 cards in your command zone is almost always better than putting 1. If you're putting 1 card in the command zone, it's got to be nasty to beat out a similar color pairing of partners, in my opinion. So you don't have to do that, though. You could be playing something like a Third Path Iconoclast. I've seen a lot of lists as I was doing my perusing. Is just red and blue. It's a young pyromancer in Izzet. But it's an uncommon creature, so that can live in your command zone. And this does bring up some interesting things where you could play like Llanowar Tribe as your commander and just have this crazy piece of ramp just sitting in the command zone. So depending on what your deck wants to do, there are really cool options for it outside of the scope of legendary creatures. For my purposes, and because I just love the theming and the spirit of Commander, I really love playing with legendary creatures. So all of my focus has been on legendary creatures.
Yeah, and
Um,
I chose to build the same, but kind of for the opposite reason of it's I'm gonna be against the grain on this one here. You know, this is our Thoughtcast, this is our podcast thing, and this is about sharing our experiences and ideas with these kind of things. Diving into Pauper Commander, I disagree on the idea of allowing to any uncommon as your commander. I
Fair.
think it has to be the legendary ones. This is this is not the rule. You build however you see fit. If you find what you like. Myself personally, I disagree with having a commander that isn't legendary, so I chose to make mine the build that I did so far. I chose it
Yeah,
to be legendary, and future builds that I'm going to do will be legendary. But please build to your discretion.
totally. Yeah, everything that we're talking about right now is based off of what the official rules on pdhhomebase.com/rules says, which is the home base for it. Um, the rules for starting life are different here as well, which John and I have not played. We just go off of regular commander rules whenever we're playing Pauper Commander. But the multiplayer variant of Pauper Commander, you start at 30 life and 16 commander damage kills you. All the rest is totally normal. That's the only difference in there. Uncommon creature in the command zone, the 99 is all common cards, and the starting life is 30, 16 commander damage. There's the overview. There's a 2-player variant as well, but it's a lot less popular. It's just 25 starting life. Commander damage isn't there. No free mulligans. The first player does not draw a card first. Other than that, we're talking about regular old commander here, just with some commons.
Yeah.
There is a very short ban list for Pauper Commander, and that is Mystic Remora and Rhystic Study. Thank you, Pauper Commander Rules Committee. I really appreciate this.
At least that's the ban list for multiplayer anyway.
Yeah, of course. There's a much larger ban list for 2-player, but that's not really what we're talking about today.
Right. We're here about the fun, the free for all.
100%. So let's talk just a bit about what some of the more popular, like if we want to start kind of top down of like the competitive Pauper scene versus just some cool fun decks. There is a website. All of this as well. You can find this through the Pauper EDH subreddit. And they have a bunch of resources pinned to the side, which I've found super helpful. So one of these is a competitive Pauper EDH guide website that gives, it's just a data harvesting website. And it seems like the most winning deck right now is Gretchen Titchwillow, which I have pulled up here. Gretchen Titchwillow is green and a blue for a legendary halfling druid. It's obviously an uncommon. It's an 0/4 and just has an ability of 2 green and blue to draw a card. You may put a land from your hand onto the battlefield. So it growth spirals for 4 mana. Does not require her to tap, which is the important part. So you would play Gretchen as a combo deck where you're either trying to use you would be using Freed from the Real, which is a common, among any of the other things that untap permanents or untap lands, and then try to get your lands to tap for more than a single mana via either Wild Growth, which also, man, Wild Growth is an incredible card in this format. It's basically your Soul Ring because you don't have Soul Ring in this format because Soul Ring is an uncommon. So once you generate infinite mana, you just use Gretchen's ability over and over and over. It's like playing Thrasios, honestly. It's shocking how similar this is to Thrasios.
Yeah, it's very close.
Infinite mana, draw your deck, play all of it. Win the game from there. Something else I noticed as I was going through a lot of these lists, there are essentially no board wipes. This is something we were talking about
not really.
as we were prepping for this episode, playing some Pauper Commander last night with our friend Fish. Shout out Fish. We were like, there's just no real board wipes, so you don't really get punished for, I'm going to play all of my creatures and then pass the turn. There's a ton of targeted removal. We were talking about Snuff Out before the episode, being a really popular targeted removal piece in black because it's a piece of free interaction. As well as in blue, you have all of the like Can't Scream. That's not called Can't Scream.
Unable to scream.
Unable to scream. You have all of like the blue enchantments like that. There's really good targeted removal in this format. So you have that obviously, but board wipes, there are basically none. If there are any, I didn't see any coming up on actual lists. So
That is absolutely one of the aspects of this format that you lose a significant amount of power behind just because of the characteristics of this. Dedicated card draw is another one that is really minimized in a deck like this. When you're not playing blue, I guess, to be fair, because like the really good pull over here to Pauper is that like blue already in regular commander decks are playing your cantrippy kind of cards anyway, ops and
Ponder, Preordain, Serum Visions.
Ponder,
these are all commons. Maybe not.
All of those. So when you're not playing blue, your actual card draw pieces that the other colors normally gain, you are severely lacking in those, and that's a tough challenge to build around.
Yeah. We can talk more about, because my Pauper deck focuses very heavily on card draw. It's a blue and green deck, so I'll talk more about card draw options when we get to talking about the deck list that I chose to build. Gretchen seems like a really consistent combo deck. So I'd be looking to play that tournaments. Arabella, Abandoned Doll, is a very recent addition as an uncommon legendary artifact creature. It's a toy. It costs 2 mana in Boros colors. It's a 1/3. When it attacks, it deals X damage to each opponent, and you gain X life, where X is the number of creatures you control with power 2 or less. So you're just playing tokens and stuff to go wide. Again, like we talked about, you basically don't get punished for going wide without board wipes. So you can just go as wide as you want, and then she just domes the table over and over. This is a deck that our friend Fish built and was playing the other night, and it is ridiculous. If you want to watch that, we have some stream highlights. You can go back and rewatch the replay for that. But Arabella goes crazy. Yeah. Last really powerful commander I want to talk about before we move on to more of the fun of the format. Last really competitive one is Abdel Adrian Gorian's Ward. He backgrounded either by Candlekeep Sage or by Agent of the Iron Throne. Candlekeep Sage being a blue and white blink deck, a control strategy that you're just reusing your ETB abilities of like Helpful Hunter and Spirited Companion and these things to just generate card advantage, which we talked about is not super plenty. Getting a bunch of cards off of that, sucking all of them up, reusing them. The black variation of the deck using Agent of the Iron Throne would take advantage more of sacrificing those tokens that you're making with him to just dome the board as you're going. More of an aristocrat strategy. Similarly, abusing ETB abilities like Abdul always does. But man, I mean, he's a good enough commander to be played in plain old Commander and competitive Commander, like let alone competitive Pauper or just a regular Pauper deck. I would say if you're planning on building an Abdel Adrian deck, prepare for some groans from the table as somebody who used to play him in a full-fledged Commander deck. He is very consistent and very good, but it's just cool that you can play him. He's an uncommon. I so many times found myself shocked as I was going, oh my god, that card's an uncommon? Like, Arabella is ridiculously good, but is an uncommon, and same with Abdel Adrian. So this was neat to see those. John,
it's just really, it's really cool that, like, especially when it comes to some of the legendary creatures part of this here, like, just tapping into some of these already really, really strong pieces that you would play in regular Commander, but just what kind of... It's kind of like figuring out how to break the cards even more. When your restriction is everything of yours has to be at a common power level, what is at that point, what's the strongest things that you can do, knowing that everybody else that you're going to be playing with is also only doing commons as well. So like, not even some of those like really, really strong ones you're talking about here. Take like a legendary, or not even a legendary, but just to take an uncommon, like, oh, I don't know, let's see here, a blue-black one here that says ninjutsu abilities cost 1 less, and then other ninjas and rogues. So there you go. You get to, like, what's your best ninjas and rogues that you could play at common to make, like, the best Kindred-style deck? Or then you play something that's either, like, spell slingery with, like you said, like, Third Path Iconoclast. Yeah, or, like, Agar I saw on here as well. Dude. It's, like, you know, what's the best spell slingers that you can do when you've lost... Yeah, when you've lost access to your like rare and higher like spell copiers and draw card spells and things of that nature. It's a real
Totally.
it's a very cool dive into finding out what's the most powerful things that you can do at a fraction of the cost.
Yeah, moving away from talking about the competitive scene and some of the more degenerate commander options, like you were saying, there's just neat things that you can do across all of the uncommon creatures, specifically without the legendary tag on them, which I think I do land more on what you were talking about, where I don't like building these decks without a legendary creature because it feels less like commander. But some things, cool things you could be doing, is Patchwork Automaton. I came across. It's 2 mana for an artifact creature. It's construct. It's colorless, so it's a colorless identity deck. It's got Ward 2, and whenever you cast an artifact spell, you put a +1/+1 counter on him. So just playing a bunch of eggs or something that are all commons and trying to recur those and play more so that you make your patchwork huge. Any of the cards that have Lieutenant on them that are uncommons all of a sudden become busted because they both have Lieutenant and are your commander. So Loyal Apprentice is the one that's the most interesting to me. It's 1 and a red for a human artificer with haste. It's a 2/1, and Lieutenant, at the beginning of your combat on your turn, if you control your commander, you make a 1/1 colorless Thopter with haste. So you play him on turn 2, and you both have your commander and have that Lieutenant ability because it tracks for itself. So love that you can do that with the Lieutenant creatures. I hope that we can see some more of those soon. Lieutenant is just a really cool ability that I wish that they printed a bit more often on some cards. And then one that even you mentioned before the episode, John, as we were scrolling by, is Slippery Boggle. Is a green-blue deck. You get 2 colors in your single mana creature that's an uncommon. And you can just Voltron him because he has hexproof. It's a 1 mana 1/1 with hexproof, and that's all that it does, and that's incredible. Which is actually a great segue, I would say, to start talking about the decks that you and I have built, John. Do you want to tell me a little bit, and the listeners at home, about your Pauper Commander deck?
Yeah, I'd love to go ahead and take the wheel on that, and it's definitely a good lean into what we were like segue into the other things like Voltron. So I decided I wanted to try to find something that was like a feels of a theme that I really enjoy doing, and I'm a very big Enchantress enjoyer. I love the style. I love the style of enchantment style related decks. I own several different enchantment decks normally as is, and this new one that I made is no exception to that. And so I was started from the ground up, working our way forward as like, okay, so we have to have an uncommon as our legendary creature, and everything else is filled out as common. So I need to pick something for the Enchantress theme that I decided on. Like, what would suit my bill super well? And like, there was tons of choices. And yes, if I really wanted to, if I was not sticking with the I wanted to play a legendary creature card with it, I probably could have done Slippery Boggle and done like green auras and have some counterspell backup as well. But then I was stumbling. Because again, like I was talking about, I own lots of bulk. So I was just like in the sorted piles right there. I was going through uncommon multicolored creatures, just sorting them through. And I was like, oh, this looks neat. This looks fun. And then you start reading some of these cards that you normally have not been putting into other decks before. And it's like, how much better does this become when the Pauper restrictions are in play on that? And what one of the biggest ones that came across for me is that like, okay, in these colors there is a limited amount of card draw, and so and protection as well. You know, you don't get access to heroic intervention at this power level, and honestly a lot of even the really good like spot protection spells are also at uncommon and higher as well, so you don't get a lot of choice when it comes to common on that. And so I dug into, and I started with the best as far as the Enchantress colors are concerned, Selesnya, and I stumbled into Kutzil Malamut Exemplar, which is
What a legend.
What a legend. Let me go ahead and read this. Kutzil from the Lost Caverns of Ixalan set is 1 green and a white. A legendary cat warrior is a 3/3. 2 lines of two. That was 3 fingers. 2 lines of text. It's a 3/3.
2 lines of text.
2 lines of text here. Your opponents can't cast spells during your turn, and whenever 1 or more creatures you control, each with power greater than its base power, deals combat damage to a player, draw a card.
Ridiculous.
I've gone on this show before and have said that cards like Grand Abolisher are one of my favorite. Grand Abolisher is one of my favorite cards in the game. And so having access to an uncommon legendary that kind of does what Grand Abolisher does is phenomenal. What that means is during your turn, whatever strategy you would want to work for Kutzil, you essentially have the go-ahead during your turn, because again, at Pauper level, there's not tons of slow you down activated abilities that are going to stop you, and certainly no planeswalkers either.
Yeah. I have played with Kutzil quite a lot. Lost Caverns of Ixalan was one of my highest win percentage drafts. And when you started building this deck and we played for the first time, and I realized that he mitigated all of the downside of playing auras on your creatures while also giving them an upside of drawing cards when they hit people, my jaw hit the floor. That is such a cool way to use Kutzil.
Yeah, so as he was saying here, yes, I decided to turn Kutzil into a Voltron strategy. Aura Voltron is a theme that you can do in Commander. It's essentially taking relatively cheap, but they also boost power auras in specifically to boost the power of creatures. So you're using a combination of creatures that have natural protection or evasion and slapping onto them auras that boost their power levels significantly. So it's kind of like it's a similar theme to like what you would do with like +1/+1 counters, except you're stacking lots of abilities onto a single creature. And so
I love it.
And so the bulk of this deck is, especially in its creatures anyway, we are filled out with an assortment of creatures that help me either with the enchantment finding, naturally have protection, or have a keyword ability on them of some kind that really wants to help them hold auras. So like some of our best aura holders in this deck is stuff like Aura Gnarlid, 2 and a green for a 2/2 beast that creatures with power less than it can't block it, and it gets +1/+1 for each aura on the battlefield. Amazing.
Oh, silly.
It's amazing. You throw that on him. Another one, like you were talking about, is along the lines of Bogles, Glade Cover Scout, and I guess to an extent, Silhana Ledgewalker. Both of these are elf scouts. Well, the other one's an elf rogue, but they both naturally have hexproof. In the case of Silhana Ledgewalker, it has hexproof and can't be blocked by except by creatures with flying.
Oh, weird. It's like a slightly better version of flying.
Yeah, kind of.
Because
Yeah,
it can't
so
be
like
blocked by
nothing.
reach.
Yeah, nothing on the ground can block it. Yep.
Interesting.
We have aura reducers in here, like Transcendent Envoy and Starnheim Corsair. Both of these make
Crazy.
that. Corsair makes artifacts and enchantments cost 1 less, while Envoy makes auras cost 1 less. And then you have our tutors. We actually have like a few cards that tutor auras out of this deck. We have Heliod's Pilgrim, Ironclad Slayer, and Shrine Steward. All 3 of these cards go and grab auras out of her libraries. The Slayer can also grab an equipment if need be, but this is great. We've got things that want to hold auras, we have cards that drop the cost of auras, and we have tutors to go and get exactly the auras we need.
So good. Yeah, I found that, and maybe you'll agree with this, it doesn't feel like it's less powerful than Commander. Not necessarily.
It
just has a different ceiling to it.
Yeah, like, especially when you start going into the actual meat and potatoes of what this deck actually is, which is the auras. Like, I'm going to start rattling some of these off. You tell me how many of these you've seen in an auras list before. All That Glitters, Ancestral Mask, Armadillo Cloak, Ethereal Armor, Hyena Umbra, Mammoth Umbra, Rancor, Spider Umbra. You know what I mean?
These are the ones that you want to play anyway.
You play these in Aura Voltron decks anyway, so
Right.
it just, the fact that they're already a common, And like, while yes, a little bit of the pieces here or there, like you don't get every powerful aura ever in the game, but especially ones like Ancestral Mask. Like, are you kidding me? That is
Yes.
ridiculous power boost. 3 mana aura that gives an enchanted creature +2/+2 for each other enchantment on the battlefield. Total, all of them.
Wild.
Ridiculous. Armadillo Cloak, +2/+2, trample, and when it deals that much damage, you gain that much life.
So good.
Amazing. But then, because you're limited to the commons then as well, you have to start finding some other really niche pieces that help you either protect the creature that you're enchanting or other forms of power boosting. So like a new favorite of mine that I found into here, Chains of Custody. Two and a
Yes,
white
dude.
2 and a white aura that when it enters the battlefield, exile target non-land permanent an opponent controls until Chains of Custody leaves the battlefield, and the enchanted creature gains Ward 2.
Dumb.
Amazing. That's protection and removal all in one spell.
Dumb.
All in one spell.
I love it, man. It's such a cool deck. It's also really hard to beat.
It is. And the best, funniest thing I was able to throw into this deck because it was an auras and the theme, I have an infinite combo in here as well using the aura, Presence of Gond, an aura that enchants a creature and the creature gains tap, create a 1/1 green elf creature token. You throw this onto Midnight Guard, who says that when another creature enters the battlefield under your control, untap Midnight Guard. So you just tap the guard, make an elf, he untaps, you can make infinite elves.
Yep. Which again, you don't get punished for. Especially because I've already almost forgotten about the fact that Kutzil has Grand Abolisher stapled onto him.
Yes, exactly.
So like you can do your combo pretty safely as long as
on
you have
the turn
Kutzil
you want to go to play it. Yep.
Because me, who like I'm playing a bunch of counter spells, I'm like, well, I'm just gonna sit there. I'm gonna counter Presence of Gond, and then we're gonna be totally fine. But with Kutzil, your protection for that in the command zone, you can just sneak a combo win in your Aura Voltron.
Yeah, not even trying to sneak in the combo win. The biggest problem that aura decks face is that if you go to throw something really stupid onto a creature, if you don't have the backup to keep that creature safe, you're going to 2-for-1 yourself when that creature is removed. Exactly. So
exactly.
A card like Kutzil at the helm, or specifically any of these other ones that have protection on them like Ward or Hexproof, things like that, they are pretty safe bets to hold on to these auras as you cast them. And yeah, and then we get all this silly stuff at common. One of my favorite 2-card sets that's also in here, just kind of acting as protection. I've never played with these cards anywhere else, but the Flag Bearer cards at common, these are amazing in here.
I
They're
love
so
the Flag
good.
Bearers.
Yeah, I just recently added in the Standard Bearer, actually. She's the cheaper of the Flag Bearer cards. Flag Bearers are these old creature types that if an opponent plays a spell or ability that could target a Flag Bearer in play, the player chooses at least one Flag Bearer as the target. That reads a little strange, but essentially what that means is, at least for a card, removal has to go at the Flag Bearer first because it says that one of it has to be the target. But the real silly one that Flag Bearers blank is other auras.
Yes. Or abilities.
Like,
oh my god.
Yeah, the Flag Bearers are so fun.
I would say like soaking up a piece of removal is the floor that Standard Bearer has, and the ceiling is like, well, I can't enchant this creature with Presence of Gond. Like if I'm playing like an opposing Presence of Gond combo deck, or like we were talking about with Gretchen Tilchwillow, where like Freed from the Real is an important part of that, and I go to put Freed from the Real on one of my creatures, and I can't do that if you have a Standard Bearer in play because it just goes to that instead.
Yeah, it's
Standard
like
Bearer is ridiculous, and the other Flag Bearer is very good.
Yeah,
too.
It's like having Spellskite in your Pauper deck.
It's exactly what it is. It's Spellskite.
It's amazing,
now,
and
it has to target, so you don't get to choose with like Spellskite. But again, we're splitting hairs between a common and a rare. Like
yeah, and that's my Kutzil build. That's Aura Voltron. We slam down Kutzel, stay safe during our turn, beef up one little boy with the best that we have available at common, auras, and smash face. Also refilling, although by the way, this ability is completely disregarded on Kutzel as well. You're boosting the auras onto these creatures when they're
Yeah, you're
connecting with
changing
your
their base
opponent.
power.
Yeah, when you connect with them, you're refilling. So
Yes.
that even when things
Important to note that Kutzel says that when a creature deals damage, one or more creatures deal combat damage to a player. So if you
Correct.
have one creature that's going at each player and they all hit, that fulfills the condition 3 different times, and you'll draw 3 cards off of that.
Yep.
He's really good in multiplayer.
It's very cool. I'm a very big fan of Kutzel. I'm very happy I was able to find this and play a strategy that I really, really enjoyed playing.
Yeah. I've enjoyed playing against it as well. It was a joy to see one aura after the next coming down and realizing that I could do nothing about it because you had Grand Abolisher in play. That's amazing. Do you want me to talk about mine?
Yeah, your turn.
Should I dive in? Okay. So similar to John, when I was tasked with building a Pauper Commander deck, I just said, what do I want to play? What would I want to play in any other format? And it's ramp and control. That's the 2 things that I like doing the most is ramping and controlling, which led me to think about one of my favorite content creators. His name's Dana Roach of the EDH Rec. Major shout out to Dana Roach. He talks about his Ich-Tekik Salvage Splicer and Malcolm Kenai Navigator deck all the time. And I've always been intrigued by it. I've checked out the deck list multiple times, and it's so sick. So what
you're talking about that's a regular commander deck, right?
Yeah, he's got a regular commander deck that's Malcolm Ich-Tekik. For the uninitiated, these are both uncommons, which I was pleasantly surprised to see. Malcolm Kenai Navigator is also all over the competitive Pauper EDH list. Because similar to Kutzel, he benefits in multiplayer formats. So Malcolm Kenai Navigator is 2 and a blue for a 2/2 Siren Pirate with flying, and says whenever one or more pirates you control deal combat damage to your opponents, you create a treasure token for each opponent dealt damage. So on its own, whenever he hits somebody, he makes a treasure, which is very strong. He has the partner ability. Another one of my favorites is partner. I love playing with partners. I think putting 2 creatures in the command zone is inherently busted. So I love doing it. The partner for this deck is Ich-Tekik Salvage Splicer, which is 4 and a green. For a human artificer, it's a 1/1. When it enters the battlefield, you make a 3/3 colorless golem artifact creature token. So it's one of a cycle of splicers that when they enter, they make a Phyrexian golem. And it says whenever an artifact is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, from anywhere, put a +1/+1 counter on Ich-Tekik and a +1/+1 counter on each golem you control. So the other half of what this deck is trying to do is blink Ich-Tekik and make a bunch of golems. So Malcolm makes treasures. Those treasures you can sacrifice to make your golems and Ich-Tekik bigger. So it's ramp. Your payoff for all of this is blinking Ich-Tekik. It is chef's kiss. It's a beautiful deck. It does so many things that I love doing in Commander, like drawing cards and ramping. Actually, I'll tell you exactly what it does. Because it's an even split between card advantage, interaction, and ramp. So it plays out a lot like a control deck, or maybe a tempo deck is a better way to talk about it. And then what we're really trying to do is have Ich-Tekik down, as well as something like an Archaeomancer, which is a 4-mana 1/2 that when it enters, it returns an instant or sorcery from your graveyard to your hand. With Archaeomancer and Ich-Tekik down, if you cast something like Displace, which is an instant, it's 3 mana, and it says exile up to 2 target creatures you control, and then return those cards to the battlefield under your control. You can target Archaeomancer, you can target Ich-Tekik. They both blink out, they both come back in. Archaeomancer can return Displace to your hand. So you can create not an infinite loop, but an engine of blinking both Ich-Tekik and something else. As well as we have access, because we're in blue, we have access to something like, hold on, I need to find it. We have access to Muldrifter, which is just when it enters the battlefield, draw 2 cards. So Archaeomancer, Muldrifter, and Displace means blinking those out, come back in, drawing 2 cards. Again, we talked about how kind of bad the card draw spells are comparatively in this format. So having access to drawing cards on a permanent and being able to repeatedly blink those things is so good. This deck, just as a side note, gets to play like all of my favorite draw spells. It's playing Thoughtcast in the deck because we're making a bunch of treasures. Play the intro. It's playing Thoughtcast because we're making a bunch of treasures. So affinity, brings the cost down. We have access to Candlekeep Sage, which I talked about with Admiral Adrian, which is ridiculous in this deck. Any backgrounds with partners are busted. So Candlekeep Sage, like I said, your commanders have when they enter or leave the battlefield, draw a card. So if you blink a commander, you draw 2 cards off of it. Probably the best card draw engine in the deck, to be honest. We get access to Reverse Engineer, which is kind of like Thoughtcast. It's improvise, draw 3 cards for 5 mana, 2 of it being blue. We get to play Meeting of the Minds, which is a 4 mana instant that has Convoke and draw 2 cards. So it's just like a weird hodgepodge of card advantage. Because we're playing blue, we have access to all of the good counter spells. We have actual counterspell, we have Memory Lapse, we have Arcane Denial, all of these really good interaction spells, as well as things like Snap. We have Fall from Favor is one of my favorite removal spells in the format. It's just 2 and a blue. It's an aura that enchants a creature, and it taps enchanted creature, and you become the monarch. And as long as you're the monarch, that creature doesn't untap during its untap step. Super, super good. So it locks something down. Bewitching,
and also just puts the monarch in play.
Puts the monarch in play.
There's not a lot of
cards.
Yeah, there's not a lot of cards at common that do that.
100%. One of the other ones in the deck is it's another pirate. Let me find it real quick. I think I have it under card advantage. Yep. So Azure Fleet Admiral is 3 and a blue for a 3/3 human pirate, which is very important for Malcolm. When it enters the battlefield, you become the monarch, and he can't be blocked by creatures the monarch controls. So if anyone gets the monarch back from you, you can just swing him at them. He's unblockable. You'll make a treasure for Malcolm, and you'll get the monarch back. So having an Azure Fleet Admiral in play guarantees that you're going to end the turn with the monarch and draw a card off of it. It's a really good card, and it's especially good that it's a pirate in this deck. The one other pirate that I'm playing in here is Cloud Pirates, which is just a single... It's a single blue for a 1/1 with flying, and it can only block creatures with flying, but it's a pirate. So he becomes, I can probably attack somebody with this and make a treasure off of it. It was a fun little include. It's only been printed in like Portal 3 Kingdoms, so it's like a $2 card, and it felt really weird buying it. But with there's 15 pieces of ramp in this deck. Including Lotus Petal, which we talked about is the most expensive card in the format. But Lotus Petal has some added synergy in the deck because of Ichtekik and artifacts going to the graveyard. So this deck just does everything that I love doing. I love artifact tokens. That's probably my favorite thing to do in the game, is make some little tchotchkes somewhere, like make a little treasure, a little clue or something. Mm-hmm. So making treasures, blinking creatures, interacting with the board, drawing cards, ramping. That is everything that this deck does, and it's beautiful. We also, with the oncoming release of Innistrad Remastered, are getting some new commons into the format, and 2 of those that I'm benefiting directly from in this deck is Imprisoned in the Moon and Essence Flux. So Imprisoned in the Moon is interesting because it was a rare and has been downshifted to uncommon in Foundations, and then is now downshifted to common in Innistrad Remastered. And because it's been printed as a common somewhere, you have access to it in the format. So yep. Imprisoned in the Moon, banging, and then Essence Flux is just another single mana bounce, or a single mana blink spell. What's
Essence
nice about
Flux is an amazing card.
Yeah, it's really, really good. I don't have spirits in the deck, so I'm not getting counters off of anything. Nah. But it still is just... it becomes counter target like Hero's Downfall. Obviously not in the format, but not yet. Because they choose to target it, you blink it instead, and all of a sudden I've gotten value off of it. Like, God forbid if you have a Candlekeep Sage down and can 1 mana blink your commander, draw 2 cards. That's crazy. So I have actually started bringing this deck with me whenever I'm like out on the road, out touring somewhere. I bring it with me because I love it so much, and I just want to sit and goldfish with it. I always travel with a deck or two, just in case I come across an LGS somewhere across America. And I've just loved bringing this deck along just as a cool option. It's also like you could play your Pauper deck into a precon like table. Be like, well, I don't have a precon, but I have this deck that's only commons. It should hold up pretty well.
And that'd be pretty fair.
Yeah, I think that would be totally fair. If I was playing a precon and someone was like, I have a Pauper deck, I'd be like, sweet, bring it on. That'd be perfect. So just been absolutely a blast. Once again, shout out Dana Roach for the original deck idea that I kind of pulled from for this, but obviously it's an entirely different deck. We also his deck has every card that says Splicer on it that you can play. So it's all of the different things that make golems. There is exactly one of those that's common, and that is Maul Splicer. It's the worst of them.
Is that the one that gives them trample?
Yeah, and it's 7 mana.
7 mana.
It's 7 mana for a 1/1. It does put 2 golems into play when it comes into play. So it's 7 power for 7 mana, and it gives them trample, which is also really good when you're beefing all of them up with Ich Tekic. That 7 mana really hits hard.
You need a top end in a format like this,
100%.
And when you're locked commons, you get Red Maw. And then you start getting into the weird stuff.
There's 2 7-drops in this deck. One of them is Maul Splicer, and the other is Merit's actually an 8-drop. Merit is the other top end of the deck. It's an 8 mana 7/7. It's colorless. It's got trample, and when it enters the battlefield, if mana from a treasure was spent to cast it, you create a treasure token for each mana from a treasure spent. So he just recycles your treasures. Which
construct or a golem?
It is. I wish it was a golem, dude. It's a construct. There are no other golems in the deck.
Bummer.
But I'm looking forward to it now. See, this is one of those things. Is now as spoiler season comes on, I'm excited to see the commons that are printed now. Like I'm like, oh, I hope that there's a golem.
Like, is it a pirate? Is it a golem?
Is it a pirate? Is it a golem? Is it a splicer? Like, is it a blink spell? Is it a recursion piece? Like, I want to start swapping out some of the pieces as new sets come out, like I did with the Imprisoned in the Moon and the Essence Flux. So this deck is an absolute blast. It's been so fun to play it. It's a ramp deck that only has 2 top end pieces because the top end is just how many times can I blink Ich Tekic. So
and
like
golems, yeah,
100%. For 3 mana, if you have your displace and you kind of have the engine set up, you can just go like for every 3 mana that I spend, I'm going to make a golem or I'm going to draw 2 cards or whatever, and then keep your hand full, have interaction, save up a little extra mana. So it's wild playing a deck that cares about having as many like mana producing resources in play as possible, while also not really playing anything in the top end. But it's been fun to play.
I didn't look at your deck list. Do you have Peregrine Drake in there too?
I do not have Peregrine Drake in here.
Oh, you definitely should, because if you have the things like the Ghostly Flicker and the Archaeomancer with Peregrine Drake, that's infinite mana.
Wow, I'm learning about this as we go. Is Peregrine Drake legal? That's a common?
It was common in Eternal Masters.
Whoa.
That's why it got banned in the actual Pauper format itself, the 60-card constructed one. It should be anyway.
Wow, I can play Peregrine Drake in this deck.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
That's a combo that I play in Yarok, is if you have the thing that can recur the Blink spell and Peregrine Drake, the Archaeomancer gets back the Blink spell like you said, Peregrine Drake ups you 2 mana every time you do that loop, which you then shift the blink. You then shift the blink spell after you've built up your infinite mana. You blink it over to Ich Tekic or anything else that's entering, making treasures.
I even have a spare Peregrine Drake. I'd need to throw that in there.
Yep, there you go. Look at us, Deck Brewing live. You heard it here first,
Deck
folks.
Brewing.
Live Pauper reaction.
Incredible. That's incredible. Is there anything? Yeah, give me the YouTube face. There's your cold open, John. Let me just shake my camera. Before we wrap up the episode, is there any decks that you've been eyeing about building? Like maybe you build a second Pauper deck? What are you thinking about?
I don't know. Like it's very, very cool. And I feel like Pauper is gonna probably end up being my outlet for the color combinations that I don't normally play. Like I don't actively play like Rakdos, or I don't actively play a lot of other like monocolor shells or things like that.
Right.
So, like, if I find something interesting that I then want to throw a bunch of these bulk thingies at, uh, like like we I know we have another person from our Discord who made Pauper thing. He made Jury Master of the Review, and that is an
Yes.
amazing sacrifice deck that just simply takes a very powerful uncommon and just all of those common sacrifice outly things. Like, that sounds like a really fun idea. I
Yeah.
love doing that kind of thing. um I also keep seeing Finn pop up here. Pauper Death
Ugh,
Touch sounds amazing.
yuck, dude. Pauper
But
Death Touch Poison. That's
yeah,
fun. See, there's
yeah,
just what I think is great is it becomes an outlet for things that you can't really play in full bore command. What do we call it? Just EDH. You can't play in regular commander because the power level floor is so high that if you wanted to play Finn, you would just get targeted removal out of the game. You just would not have access to that in a regular commander game. But because the resources are so different in Pauper, you actually like it's just a really broad, really healthy, diverse format on looking at it.
yeah, it especially like it opens up into two really big avenues that regular commander you don't see much anymore. One, it opens up your deck building expertise on like finding pieces and synergy that works at the common power level that you are matching against everybody else. And like you just said, it also just opens the doors a little bit to more unique legendary creatures just in general, like stuff you normally would not see, especially at the helm of a commander deck. Like, yeah, you can definitely make a very powerful regular commander deck using an uncommon legendary creature, but the chances of really seeing something like that out in the wild, you're not really going to spot those too terribly often. So this is a good place to start a like see some fun brand new strategies that you normally would not see due to the power level at regular commander.
Yeah. Something interesting that I was noticing in one of those data resources as well is the average tracked game of Pauper EDH ended at turn 9, which is kind of refreshing. Like coming from Commander, where it's like, well, if by turn 4 you don't have some strategy in the play to start winning the game in the next few turns, you're probably going to lose. Or you're playing a Commander deck, or you're playing a control deck or something.
Mm-hmm.
Having like the tracked competitive games going to turn 9 just feels so like I'm here for that, because then you actually get to sit and do the thing that you want to do. You're probably looking at about an hour at that point. Like you can get a few games in the night. It's just so good. I highly recommend in the new year, if one of your New Year's resolutions was to build more decks, but you're trying to save money as well for some of your other New Year's resolutions, as I mentioned in the intro. Pauper is such a great outlet for this. It's so diverse. Come hang out with us and play some Pauper on our Discord. I want to play more Pauper. This is my New Year's resolution from the Thoughtcast is I want to play Pauper Commander more often, and I want to build a few more decks with it. Just to have some options. So I would say if you're an avid deck builder, an avid brewer, throw a Pauper deck into your box and just see if anyone else has it. If we can all just build one deck, then when we all show up at Commander Night, we can go like, well, do we want to play CDH? Do we want to play regular Commander? Do we want to play Pauper? You just have so many options. Big fan of it. And the barrier to entry is so low. Buy yourself a Lotus Petal. Just do it.
Yeah, get out there and make yourself a deck with all those comments from that Walmart mystery bundle you had to buy.
Yikes. Did you just at yourself, John?
Yes, I continue to do that, and I refuse to not do so.
He said, maybe this time.
Hey,
Oh,
look,
that's
listen,
amazing.
you go out and get one of those mystery packs, and the one time you get a hit, that serotonin kicks in and is like, ooh, I got a discount mana drain. Whoa!
I think you have a gambling addiction, John. Oh, well, that has been today's episode of the MTG Thoughtcast. Thank you so much for watching and hanging out with us. And we'll see you in a week, 2. I don't know. We'll see you soon. Thanks for watching. See you guys.